This PPT Presents broadcast is brought to you by TechWitch Detroit. TechWitch Detroit for all your IT needs. Please visit us on the web at techwitchdetroit.com. TechWitch Detroit, we can help.
This episode of PPT Presents is brought to you by Pagan Pathways Temple. Pagan Pathways Temple is a 501c3 out of beautiful Madison Heights, Michigan. We offer classes, community outreach, ritual space, and a library available to our members. To find out more or to become a member, please go to paganpathwaystemple.org or patreon.com/paganpathwaystemple. Pagan Pathways Temple, growing in the old ways where all paths are open.
All of the opinions expressed on this show are those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily express the views of Pagan Pathways Temple or its affiliates. Welcome to PPT Presents, episode 26. Thank you for listening. Today on PPT Presents, we have a special episode of It Makes You Think with Cynthia Day and Fur. Cynthia and Fur will be further exploring the divine masculine with our Guiding Priest Nashan, also known as Stanley Nunn, and our Board Member Jester D. Please join us in our Facebook community group as we celebrate peace in June. We can be found at facebook.com/groups/Pagan Pathways Temple. Thank you again for listening and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Hi,
and now
welcome
it's
to
time
podcast
for
26
It Makes You Think
of It
by
Makes You
Cynthia
Think.
Day.
Today,
Subjects
Fur and I
that
are
are
going to go
sufficiently
over a couple of
complicated
interviews that
enough
I did
to give one pause,
with a couple
just
of board
enough
members at
to make you
Pagan
think.
Pathways Temple. There was Jester D and also Nashan, who is also known as Stan Nunn, who is our guiding priest for the temple. Say hi, Fur.
Hi, Fur.
Okay. So, I guess we could get right into it, but to set this up, Jester D came over to my house, and it was a very hot, beautiful day, so we decided to sit outside on the front porch. And I just asked him a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
And just to get his idea of what the divine masculine meant to him and what it was about from his viewpoint. And then I went over to Stan's house and asked him some questions as well. So first we'll take a little time to listen to what Jester D had to say. Hi, I'm sitting here with Jester D, who is a fellow board member of PPT, Pagan Pathways Temple. And we're going to do an interview today on the divine masculine. Say hello, D.
Hello, D. How's it going? Oh, wait. Hi, Cynthia. It's good to see you.
Yeah. So, the divine masculine, what does it mean to you?
Well, that's an interesting question. I used to put a lot of stock in it when I was a bit younger. This idea of like being manly and aggressive and protecting everyone, and this whole guardianship thing. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of reevaluated what the divine masculine really means. I think for me, it has a lot less to do with gendered stereotypes than it used to.
Mm-hmm.
I think being a protector is important.
Mm-hmm.
Standing up for what you believe in is important, but those aren't necessarily, masculine traits. They can be associated that way. Like people see Thor's hammer and they think, oh, violence, and protecting the family. But I think now when I look at the divine masculine, I look at just kind of, it's more connected to being fatherly, nurturing in the same way as the feminine is. I think it's kind of two sides of the same coin.
Okay. How do you see the divine masculine in your own spirituality?
Well, as I said a moment ago, it used to have a lot more of an effect on my spirituality, but now I think the divine masculine is just that the aspiration to treat people with kind of a fatherliness, kind of a protector spirit. A lot more of it has to do with, am I being responsible to the people around me? That's how I look at it. And again, none of that is necessarily only related to the masculine in nature and in the divine, but I think in my personal practice, that's kind of how I associate it. So being a protector, taking responsibility for those in my tribe.
Okay. All right. Is there any other behavior that you see as making up the aspects of the divine masculine that has served to help you as perhaps you modeled it in your life?
I think what I mentioned about being responsible for those in my tribe has been useful for me. I think the idea of being a guardian in that way has been very helpful in guiding me and becoming a man for whatever that means now. Again, as I mentioned, the definition of man and masculine, not that those things are connected, but kind of traditionally they have been.
Yeah.
The idea of the divine masculine today for me just means being protective of the people around me. I mean, the other day we were in I also, as part of my life, co-host an online improv group right now because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And the other day someone said a racial slur, and they didn't see it that way. But the hairs in the back of my neck went up, and I had to stand in and say, and take them aside and say, hey, that thing that you said, it may not have been what you intended to be racist, but it is a racial slur. So I can't allow that in this space. And unfortunately, that person decided to just leave the space and take responsibility, or not take responsibility for their actions. But I think it's part of that energy for me is taking responsibility for my actions and saying, when I'm the head of this space, it's my responsibility to make sure it is a safe, open environment.
I think it's interesting too that you took on the nurturing aspect of the divine masculine when you sought to hold that person accountable for their speech.
Well, and that's something I have to think about because, I guess it's just not in my nature to jump to aggression. Like, I'm not a violent person by nature. I mean, you've known me for several years now. I mean, I don't think in any of the time you may have seen me get super aggressive towards anybody. I mean, I've been angry before.
No, you're kind of a real calm, easygoing guy.
I try to be.
Yeah, I've noticed that about you. Can you identify any of the softer aspects of being, any of the aspects of the divine masculine that maybe you have brought into your own spirituality?
I think, and I kind of touched on this before, going to a place of communing with my higher power, my divine center, is a place where, like, I'm kind of a guardian spirit. That's just the way I look at myself in a spiritual way. So to say that I've aligned those ideas, certainly I have, especially the nurturing softer side of the divine masculine is something that I've applied to myself. And at times I have to be that warrior too. But it's not so much a physical violence thing. Like, that's just not me. But I do kind of stand up and say, hey, this thing you're doing, that's not okay here.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable in this space. In my spirituality, I have to understand that I can draw strength from that aggressive tendency. Being aggressive isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just like being angry isn't a bad thing.
It's what you do with the energy.
Yes, it's where I channel that energy.
Yeah. Okay.
More often than not, I channel it to being silly, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that about you too, which I think is adorable. How is or could be the divine masculine be helpful to our current state of the patriarchy in this country? What do you think?
How can the divine masculine be helpful in the patriarchy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the patriarchy needs to die.
Well,
I don't know if anything it's about. I think let me see if I can reframe that. I think the patriarchy is incredibly toxic.
Yeah, it's what we live with
It
now.
It is, unfortunately, and we've made great leaps towards expanding ideas and acceptance and inclusivity, and that's amazing. And even like within the temple, one of the things I love about the space of the temple is it's so inclusive of different ideas and different life paths and you know, racially and sexually and all, just so many different. It's just such a wonderful place to come and get to know different types of people. I mean,
And be yourself,
and
really.
be myself. Yeah. So I think the idea of,
Because those traits can also be part of the divine masculine, but I just don't think they're brought out.
I think there's an idea in the masculine space that it's hard to hold space for different opinions, because the idea of being arrogant and can be tied, or the idea of stubbornness can be tied to masculinity. And I think, like, no, if your idea of masculinity is not allowing space for differing opinions, then you need to check yourself.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, I'm wrong all the time.
Oh, gosh.
All the time. And that's okay. That's how I learn. And I don't know how, I will say this, and they can bleep it if they need to. I don't think they typically do, but one of the rules of thumb that I have in improv, and I'll bring this to back to your question in a moment, but one of the ideas in improv is part of the process is you inevitably step in shit. You will say something that is terrible. You just will. You don't mean it. It's not malicious. Just stuff comes out of your mouth and you're like, ooh, that was a mistake.
Everybody sticks their foot in their mouth.
Yeah, no,
once.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's about not stepping in the same pile.
Yeah. Learn from your mistake.
Learn
When you
from
know
your
better,
mistake.
do better, right?
So I think our society at large could gain a lot from the what I see is, at least in my spirituality, is taking responsibility for my actions and for the space I am responsible of holding. I mean, yeah, there's some masculinity to that, but it's not just that. Also, I think that as a nation, we could do well to own our mistakes more than we do.
Oh, yeah. Recognizing our mistakes like perhaps Germany has.
Like the legacy of oppression for people with less power, minorities,
Yes.
women, the LGBTQ plus community.
And the American Indians, the indigenous
Indians.
peoples. Yeah.
So many people, and recognizing the privilege that, you know, I am a straight, white, cisgendered man, and I have taken a long time in my own personal journey to understand what that means, and then dive into literature written from other perspectives, and then get to know people from different perspectives. I did not have a transgender person in my life until I became part of the temple community.
Yeah,
What an enriching experience that was, to understand what that experience is. Yes, I'm never going to fully live that experience because it's not part of my story, but knowing a person who has gone through different life experiences has been such an enriching experience. It's just like, talk about checking my privilege, which is simultaneously really challenging, but also amazing in the big picture, because then I get to understand, like, hey, I'm not the only one holding the microphone here. I'm not the only one telling this story. Sometimes it's my job to shut up and listen. That has been a great lesson in my life, to shut up and listen sometimes. Ironically, being told through an interview where I'm supposed to talk.
Well, there's a still quiet power in being in the divine masculine. And I think that in that aspect that a person would be more open to listening. I think that's very appropriate.
A friend of mine once told me, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk.
Yeah. And not worry about always being right, too, because you're always going to find out something that you didn't know. You had no way of knowing that you didn't know. And the only way you're going to take in that information is, like you say, shut up and listen.
I mean, I'm going to tell you a story, and this is just something that, and you can choose to use this or not, but about 15 years ago, I went to a party, and I didn't, again, at this time, I will admit this, at this time, I did not know a transgender person. I had none in my life, and I thought I was so evolved as a person. I was in my mid-20s, and I knew everything.
Of course, in our 20s, we do.
And I got invited to a superhero party, and I went as Tranny Man.
Oh, boy.
And looking back, at the time, I saw nothing wrong with that. Now I see it like I'm horrified by that behavior. But I have to look back and say that's who I was at that time. I didn't know any better. I had no one in my life to teach me that lesson at the time. And now I have people who, I've been so honored to understand that experience and have people share that with me.
And I think that it's made all that much more powerful for you now because you had that experience in the past, that when you have new experiences to it, it's like you're learning backwards and you're carrying it forward into your future. It has more meaning for you.
Yeah. And I look back and I think, that guy has some hard lessons to learn coming down his road. And I also have to say, those are mistakes that I have to own. It's been a long road since then. I've gone through something I've shared is I'm a person who does not drink or use drugs anymore. I for quite a few years, because I decided that influence was not good in my life. So I have a lot of it's the journey of taking responsibility for myself, for the actions I've taken, and again, not stepping in that same pile.
Yeah, if America could just learn to not keep stepping in the same piles, we might actually get somewhere.
We might evolve as a nation.
Yes.
As like a human civilization, we might evolve, and a lot of it, I think, is ego. It's like this America first attitude.
Yeah.
It's just like.
I think we're moving into a more global attitude. I mean, look at the world. The entire world is very much aware of what's going on in America today.
Yeah.
And I think really that the strength and connection aspects of the divine masculine are really being brought forward in communication and in understanding.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, these aspects can also be found in the divine. So while I was listening to Jester D, I unfortunately got a phone call. And it stopped me right in mid-sentence. Yeah, I know. I didn't realize how to use the do not disturb function on my phone. So let's listen to the last few minutes of what Jester D had to say. Okay?
Okay.
So here we are again with Jester D. And to finish up our interview, the last thing I wanted to ask you was, what feels good to you about the divine masculine? And I really want to try to steer you in the direction of self-care, because you've told me so much about how protecting others and being a guardian and being the one that stands up for others is very important. But what about what the divine masculine does for you individually? How has it strengthened you in terms of self-care and self-understanding?
I think it has a lot to do with personal responsibility. learning how to be the masculine side of nurturing, or learning how to be accountable in that way, means that I make mistakes, like what I mentioned earlier as we were talking. I have done things in the past that at the time I thought, well, this is going to be hilarious. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, like, it's not very funny. It wasn't even really that funny at the time. It was just, but I didn't have the experience, the knowledge,
or the frame of reference.
Yeah,
the real frame of reference.
Yeah, to step outside and see, like, is this really funny? Because the likelihood is that there's a lot of people at that party that I went to. The likelihood is one of them probably understood that experience and maybe wasn't comfortable enough to come out at that time and live that experience. And me acting that way certainly didn't help. Making a joke of that experience. And now I know, like, self-care wise, it's a lot of just personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. Taking time in meditation, in prayer, in silence, and just saying, what effect have my actions that have happened today had on other people? What is my footprint in the world that I have today? Mm-hmm. Have I stepped in any of the same piles today?
Yeah.
Because the reality is, I make mistakes every day. I do. And I think part of it is being compassionate of the process of life, understanding that I'm a human being and I'm allowed to make mistakes.
And you're allowed to learn from your past behavior, because I do believe that people do change. I know that I have. It sounds like you have.
I've changed a lot.
Yeah.
And I will continue to change. Part of it is understanding how to deal with conflict. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a lesson I've had to learn. Spiritually, that means that when I had this idea in my head years ago that anybody that walked what I perceived as a quote-unquote dark path needed to be my enemy. And now I'm understanding, like, first off, what does a dark path even mean, perspective-wise? Second off, what is an enemy? What does that mean? I mean, I look at, like, for my own spirituality, I think, like, is someone actively seeking to do harm to other people? Mm-hmm. Or have my actions harmed other people, whether intentionally or not? And those two questions put it in perspective, and it's more of a question, is this a person who I want to have in my life? And mm-hmm. is this an action that do I need to step up and use the privilege that I have to make a positive impact? Because the reality is, and I've used this analogy before, just by being born in the body, in the gender, in the sexuality that mm-hmm. I have a lot more societal quote-unquote privilege than other people have. So I have a choice. I can stand here and benefit from it and not do anything about it, or I can try to find a way to use that to make a positive impact in the world.
I think that's wonderful. I really do.
Thank you.
Would that a lot more people felt the way that you do. And I think that that you speak on a number of aspects of the divine masculine in bringing that out about yourself.
Thank you.
And I think perhaps talking about the left-handed path, as you were just discussing, that might be a really good subject for a future podcast, the left-handed paths. Mm-hmm. And are they not bad, good, indifferent, or whatever? But
yeah, because what is, like, the left, like, in as far as spirituality goes, like, where does good and evil?
Is there good and evil? Yeah. Where does the right hand path start and the left hand path start?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
A whole other conversation.
Well,
I want to thank you. Yes, I want to thank you so much for the interview today and for taking time to be on the podcast.
And thank you for being my friend.
Oh, I love being your friend. So maybe we'll hear from you again, D. Mm-hmm. All right, and that's it for this part of the podcast. Stay tuned to pick up on me and Fur.
You are listening to the Pagan Pathways Temple Broadcast Network.
Okay, so that was Jester D, and he had some interesting things to say about the Divine Masculine. Definitely about being responsible to people and his tribe. Did you think of anything that he thought that just sort of stood out to you, Fur?
Well, he had a lot more to do with being self-reflective, the past, or being introspective, looking into himself and seeing how he was using a lot more in the way of empathy, cognitive empathy, being more aware of how your actions or what you say affects others, and be accountable for what you say and do. And it's gaining wisdom.
Yeah.
Through emulation and looking at the deities for assistance and guidance with that.
Yeah, I thought it was also interesting when I spoke about the patriarchy, where he said that the Divine Masculine sort of we've made leaps towards inclusivity, expanding ideas, accepting ideas. And he did state that the traits that don't seem to be brought out of the Divine Masculine right now is that of holding space for different opinions. We need to do that. We definitely need to do that so that we can have the conversations that we need. So
you gotta have an open mind.
Yeah, gotta have an open mind. And the Divine Masculine can definitely help with that. And the still quiet power aspect of listening that he brought out, I thought was really important. And the fact that he was horrified by his own behavior early on, like 15 years ago, and that the lessons that he learned about being introduced to transgender people made more powerful now because of his previous actions. And I thought that he was very noble in discussing that. And one of the things that the Divine Masculine can show is that people do change. People do change, they reflect, and I mean, what's the use of reflecting on your behavior if you're not going to change? You know, so people, I'm a strong believer in the fact that people change, and using your deity to help you get through changes, I think is very, very important. Yeah, we got to get out of that America First attitude and have a more global attitude towards people. And he really brought out the strength and the connections of the Divine Masculine and the communication and understanding of the Divine Feminine. But one of the things that I thought was most telling was that he said that being compassionate of the process of living allows you to make mistakes and change. I thought that was really interesting.
You got to be forgiving of yourself.
Yeah, and nurturing. That's part of the Divine Masculine too, that a lot of people don't immediately pick up on, because it's been sort of typecast through the years that the Divine Masculine is all about warrior strength and protection and stuff. But there's a lot of nurturance in there too. So
there's a lot of strength in nurturing.
Oh yeah, that still quiet strength, definitely. Yeah. So I had a chance to speak to Stan Nunn, also known as Nashan, who is our guiding priest at Pagan Pathways Temple. And so it was also a beautiful, warm day. We've had a few of those. So we had our conversation out on the porch, social distancing. And I think, yeah, we both, Jester D and I, social distance on my porch as well. You know, but so that we could take the mask off and talk, because we can't really hear very well inside of a mask, especially when you're trying to tape it. So we took the mask off and stood 6 feet apart and got it done. Same thing with Nashan. So with no further ado, let's get into the interview that I had with Nashan. And
Hi.
Here it is.
This is Cynthia Day again. Yes, it makes you think. And I'm going to be asking questions about the Divine Masculine to Stan Nunn, our priest at Pagan Pathways Temple. And Stan, say hi.
Hi, how you doing?
All right. So, for the first question, which god do you mostly identify with and why?
My patron god is Yahweh, but I also have interaction with the horn god, uh, occasionally Anubis as well, and occasionally Odin as well. But my patron god is Yahweh.
Okay. What do you define for yourself as the divine masculine?
The divine masculine, in my eyes, is a manifestation of steadfastness and a steady. The divine masculine is a manifestation of a steady, consistent energy that permeates the universe, and that is one of the things that drew me to Yahweh as my patron god. Was the steadfastness of the energetic pattern that he emanates, and that, to me, is a personification of the divine masculine, the foundational energy that builds, that is the foundation upon which everything else is built.
What place does this take in your spirituality?
It becomes, in my spirituality, it requires a steady and consistent way of manifesting my practice, of working as a priest, to make sure that consistency over a long period of time is my mantra, that I am able to create something by building that foundation and then allowing other things to be built upon that. So in my practice, I have to work against some of my more Aquarian natures, which is to be kind of all over the place and maintain certain standards about how I operate and the things that I build, that they must remain consistent over long periods of time, because a way of honoring my God is to build things. It's the energy, the idea that the architect in me is being paid close attention to. So that's how I manifest in my worship.
Okay. So, an example of godlike aspects such as leader, father, as dad, husband, suitor, or boyfriend, teacher, trickster, shaman, healer, or wise and sage. What I'm speaking of is that besides the warrior, protector, provider, fertility god, and green men of the forest, do you focus on any of these other aspects in your practice?
Absolutely. In my practice, I see the Father as the manifestation of the energetic pattern that is Yahweh, to be comforting and steady for your family, to bring a consistently regular energy, consistent energy to the family that you're supporting. Not necessarily so much, supporting, but just being there, being present for those that are in need. Also, the architect. I believe that we are here to manifest something, to create something, and part of that masculine energy is to build the foundation of things, to create something that is long lasting. And true worship, in my mind, to Yahweh is to build not necessarily physical temples, but energetic temples that create a place for where people feel comfortable, or where people can come to not necessarily feel safe, but to feel at ease, because there's no chaotic energy. It's very steady, very calm energy, and that's most of what I get out of it. That's why I personify those things.
Kind of like that still, quiet presence, that
Absolutely.
still strength that people need. Okay. What do you think is the most important and beautiful aspects of the divine masculine, besides those that you just mentioned?
Well, I guess the most important. Honestly, it's this is going to sound strange, but for me, it's the invisible things that get done. It's sort of like when I have a tendency to there are things that I will do that I don't tell anyone that I'm going to do, that are for the benefit of others, and those things, in my mind at least, have a greater impact on the world than those things that are done out in the open where everyone can see, because then it's open to interpretation, open to ego being the focus, and can be misinterpreted. When we do these things that are good for all or good for some, to try to help other people, but we don't ask for the accolades, in my mind, it's the slaying of ego, and it becomes a pure act. It becomes a pure thing. And for me, that comes from the divine masculine. Yahweh asks that of me, and I feel closest to him when I'm building these things or doing these things, without necessarily asking for anyone to notice or give you a pat on the back or an attaboy. It's just you do things that need to be done, not necessarily because anyone's going to say thank you for it or even notice that you did it.
I imagine that brings you closer to your God, spiritually speaking.
Absolutely.
Okay. Here's a question. For the unexpressed aspects of an all-male theology, do you think that the lack of the female aspect of God has given rise to the vision of the goddess? In other words, which came first, goddess or God?
In my mind, they are co-equal energetic forces in the universe. To define the all as one or the other is impossible, because all encompasses all. Mm-hmm. Thus, the aspects of, when we're talking about masculine and feminine, we're talking about aspects of the all. So it would be like saying, which came first, your left hand or your right hand? They are both equal in that they serve together to form your arms and your hands to give you utility to work. The aspects of masculine and feminine are equal, and therefore they came together. They came at the same time. They were the all looking at itself and noticing these traits within, and then them being divided into the masculine and feminine aspects, or creative and destructive forces of the universe.
Okay, that's a great answer to that question. What do you think are the pros and cons of the divine masculine? Has this changed over time in modern day society?
There are a significant number of pros. Like I said, the architectural nature of it, the need and desire to build and to create and to organize societies is a part of that energy. The negative aspects have been, in my mind, the perversion of those things. Strength ruled by ego, strength ruled by violence or anger, or those things that pervert and twist those normal energetic patterns of masculinity have become toxic and become part of what we despise in this society. But I don't think those are natural parts of it. I think they are perversions of it. So, and the natural aspects of the divine masculine are beautiful. They are about creation and building and steadfastness and longevity and the bringing together of things. And I think that's or even in some cases the tearing down of things for the
purposes of building up again.
Building up new, right? To take apart something to build a new thing. So it's not as though I think that there's any necessarily negative aspects. People think the destructive aspect of the divine masculine is negative, but it's necessary. That destructive aspect of it is necessary in order to build something new. Now, the perversion of it is something totally different. The perversion of it is the twisting of it in order to dominate some others, or in order to control some the others. So that is not, in my mind, a true representation of the divine masculine. It is a twisting or perversion of it.
Okay. Well, that covers my next question, in which I was going to ask about toxic emulation of the perhaps negative perversions of divine masculine in our society. But
I can answer that, though. It's those toxic perversions of the divine masculine come from weakness. They come from an internal weakness of character, a weakness of sense of self. Those who, one of the things that I learned in martial arts was that once you learn how to truly fight, when you know what you're doing as a martial artist, most of the time you have no desire to fight. You want to pull away from it because I don't have to. So someone can say something to you and it's not going to get you upset because I don't really need to fight you. I know what I'm capable of, and I don't need to fight you. That's real strength. Okay, those who are truly capable and truly strong don't need to be affected by the pettiness and weakness of others. So words and things like that don't mean anything to them. But in a situation where it's necessary, they are capable of taking care of the situation. Those who pervert the divine masculine don't feel like they are capable of handling anything. In truth, it is a representation of an internal weakness or fear that they have inside that is manifesting as a perversion of the divine masculine. They are taking their own weakness and projecting that weakness onto others, okay, in order to satiate their own feelings of inadequacy. So in my mind, it doesn't truly represent the divine masculine. It is a twisting.
Yeah, they twist it. Definitely, they twist it. In our current patriarchy, being strong, protective, and aggressive are magnified here. What different aspects of the divine masculine would you bring out to balance this perspective for our nation?
Well, there are, like I said, there's a number of different aspects of the divine masculine that are positive in the way that they're manifested. And if we were to say, let's take the pattern of organization. That aspect is something we desperately need right now because we have so little organization to, the way our government is formed, the way we interact with one another, the bringing together or building organizations or mental constructs that allow us to speak to one another in better ways, to provide better communication. Those are things we need right now in order to build a society that can transcend these miscommunications. The reason why we're where we are right now is because people don't talk about the really difficult issues that we're having. And that lack of discussion causes misunderstanding. That misunderstanding causes anger. That anger causes violence. So if we were to correct that by opening the doors of communication, by creating parameters and dialogue, for our dialogue, so that we can actually have a conversation that is, talking about the difficult things, but in a place or a forum that is respectful to all parties, that allows everyone to be heard, and gives everybody that that the understanding that they can speak their mind here without consequence. Then that dialogue would create understanding. Therefore, it would create friendship, camaraderie, and togetherness. So, I think those aspects could be very much applied.
Do you think some of those conversations are going on now in the state of our nation?
I think there are attempts to, yes.
Yeah, because people have been literally slowed down to the point where they have to pay attention to themselves and have those inner conversations by themselves where people have been isolated.
I think that this isolation has brought to the fore. I think it's not so much that we've suddenly become aware because we've slowed down. I think it was more the tension of the moment brought attention to something that was already consistently happening.
Yeah.
But it sparked it. It was sort of like there was already this underlying of kindling and accelerant already there, and all it needed was a spark. Okay, and the fact that everything slowed down and everyone was already tense, okay, because of it, gave it the spark it needed when it happened again to explode. Okay, so the resulting riots and things that came out of it are a result of something that was already there, but wasn't being discussed because it was too uncomfortable to talk about. Okay, and this current climate of COVID has created a need, has created a tension that added to that and gave it the accelerant that it needed to spark off. So as soon as someone did something stupid,
everybody could pay attention to it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. I've only got a couple more questions. Everything will and does change. How has having the divine masculine in your spirituality guided and changed you?
Having the divine masculine in my life has been I guess the best way to put it, it has defined who I am as a father. It has defined who I am as a man, and what it means to be in control of self, and what it means to be to wield strength in a positive way, so that I have to conquer ego in order to worship properly. You know what I mean?
Really?
In order to show proper deference to my deity, I have to show that I am emulating this level of control and level of creativeness that is the personification of Yahweh. So,
and that takes ego out of the picture for you,
right? Ego is the antithesis to the true creation, to true organization. If anything built on ego is built on emotion, which is fleeting, okay, which is temporary. Any long-term project or long-term construct has to be devoid of ego of the person, because then because ego divides. Ego
it mucks it up.
Right. It draws attention to me and to mine rather than to what is best for all and what is a benefit to all. And if we don't control ego, then it insinuates its way into the things that we build.
And it runs amok.
Exactly. And so it creates instability, which is the antithesis to
of the stability that is the divine masculine.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. So it's a matter of it's given me the focus and I guess to develop enough wisdom to counteract ego in order to do what is best for the mission or whatever it is that I'm trying to create and construct. And that level of self-mastery has given me mastery over all kinds of things outside myself.
Bonus.
Absolutely.
So is there anything else about the divine masculine that you'd like to say?
Yes, actually. There has been this. Someone once told me that that being that all men are toxically masculine, and that being a man or being masculine in any way means you're toxically masculine, and that is incorrect. There is a necessity for strength in the world. There is a necessity for those who have the ability to withstand and those who have the ability to create in the world. It's necessary. And to organize in the world. There needs to be, in order for people to have confidence in the structures that we build or confidence in the organizations that we build, you have to have those who have the internal strength in order to pull that off. And in males, it personifies as the divine, as the masculine. It comes across as a strength of character, a strength of will, and people sometimes confuse a strength of will or confidence with arrogance or with toxic masculinity, and they are two totally different things. And if we're paying attention, you can tell the difference. Okay, confidence doesn't have to be about me. I don't have to tell you, how great I am. You just know. Okay, if for instance, if you're the loud one in the room bragging about everything that you can possibly do and trying to convince people, you're trying to convince people because you don't feel like you are great. Okay, those who are great, those who have strength, just do. They don't need the accolades. They don't need anyone to tell them they're doing it the right way. They just do because they know the right thing to do. And they don't know the right thing to do based off of ego or arrogance. They know because they've asked questions. They've questioned themselves. They've doubted themselves. And then they've gone and sought answers to those doubts in order to have the confidence to know I'm doing the right thing. And that is strength. That is a masculine trait. That is not toxic, simply a matter of an aspect of the divine masculine. So there are those who think that any man who demonstrates personal strength or confidence or a strength of will are toxic
or arrogant
and they like and I would love to change that in our world, because that creates this dynamic that allows weak men to gain real power by lying, by pretending, by acting as if they are genuinely caring and emotional, when really it's just their own weakness. And then they pretend and they do these things, and so people go, oh well, he's in touch with his feminine side, so therefore we're going to put him in a position of power. And then they find out, no, it's just a lie in the first place. It's okay for someone to be able to do what needs to be done, for someone to be strong and do what needs to be done. There should be more people like that. Okay, both masculine and feminine. And the divine masculine and the true masculinity has no need to subdue the feminine.
Right.
Okay, it's a recognition of the strength of the feminine as well as the strength of the masculine. And that recognition is the way I look at it is like this: a true king seeks a strong queen. Okay, and that's the dynamic that I'm talking about. The god does not seek to subdue the goddess because he feels threatened by her power, but a recognition that the goddess in any aspect is equal in power and complementary in power. And that's the true,
his power would complement her power, and they would bring out the best of both of them.
Exactly. Okay.
Kind of like the difference between being codependent and the difference between that and being interdependent.
Exactly.
Two strong people standing strong on their own 2 feet.
It's personified in the Great Rite symbolic, That the man is no greater than the woman, nor is the woman any greater than the man. It is from where they are joined that true power springs forth. Behold, the power of life. Okay, and that is the point of it, is that together they make something more powerful than their individual parts. They make something that is the whole or the all.
That's beautiful. I want to thank you, Stan. This has been a wonderful interview. And we're going to wrap this up for now and get back to What Makes You Think. And talk with Fur about some of the things that you said. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
So that was my interview with Stan, and I had learned a lot from the first interview with Jester D, and I was able to ask some interesting questions. I think I was a little better at interviewing this time around, but Stan had a lot to say. He really did. What did you think? Well, yeah, he's very deep. There's no doubt about that.
I've seen his live recordings and stuff.
Yeah, his recordings are very full of information. And I thought that his take on the divine masculine, I thought, was pretty overall representative of how he lives his life as our guiding priest. And I thought when he talked about the consistent energy that permeates the universe, which is the foundational energy of the divine masculine, that I thought he has a really good take on what it's about.
Yeah, and usually when you pick a patron deity, you look for someone that you believe that emulates you, or that is something that you want to achieve or, stretch out for, reach for. And one of his biggest things was about stability and consistency.
Yeah.
It's not just strength and ambition or, physical strength. He was looking for strength of will, strength of ability to withstand trauma and hardships and stuff of that nature. And I do believe that.
Yeah, and to be strong and nurturing for the people around him. That's two different kinds of strength.
To be an anchor, somebody to hold it down and be that rock. And that is really important to him. I could see it in the way that he uses his language and everything. And that when you keep repeating one or two words a lot, it shows where you are. Consistency was like in every sentence, every other sentence.
Yeah, he's definitely making the point. I thought what he said that was the most important aspect of divine masculine, I thought was interesting, because he said the invisible things that get done for the benefit of others, instead of being done out in the open, it's done without accolades, and he sees it as a pure act, and that sort of brings him closer to God, spiritually speaking. I thought that was also very telling.
Yeah, because the things that you do without looking for recognition, just the fact that you know that you did it, and nobody has to say thank you, nobody has to say, well, good job, or I'm really proud of you for that. No, it's you do it because it's right.
Right. Service requires no accolades. Service is just what it is. It's service. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what he had to say about twisting the divine masculine around, perversions of it.
Perversions, yes.
Like trying to dominate others or control others. I thought he had a really good take on that too, because,
like we were speaking the other day, every strength has a possibility of becoming a weakness. And you can pervert a lot of strengths and turn them into weaknesses. Confidence can easily turn into arrogance.
Especially when you add ego to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's how so many, what do you call it? People stretch or reach for fame, and once they get it, they get too flamboyant with it, and they get egotistical and stuff.
Yeah, forget where they come from.
Yeah, that's why some leaders get overwhelmed with power.
Mm-hmm.
And
they get drunk with it.
Yeah, they get drunk with it. But any strength can be a weakness, and any weakness can be a strength.
That is true. I thought it was... What's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I thought it was interesting when we got into the political aspect of it, that he said that a lack of understanding creates anger, and anger creates violence. And that what we need is an open dialogue, respectful to all parties. And the Divine Masculine can, what he said was, a pattern of organization is needed right now in this country. And I think that following that people being able to speak their mind without fear of consequences would engender friendship, camaraderie, and togetherness, just like he said. You know, and I just feel like he had a really good idea of the different aspects, because I wouldn't have thought of that as being an aspect of the Divine Masculine, but it's true. Communication and everything needs to flow, and it needs to be done in an orderly manner. And
a respectful manner.
A respectful manner, yes. And out of that organization and construction of being a person, he said that it gave him mastery over many things in life. And I believe that's true, because he's been my friend for, I think 9 years, I think, maybe 8 or 9 years. He's one of the most stable people who I've ever met, and Stan is just Stan. He's been consistent the entire time that I've known him. But he's so right about ego. He's so right about it turning into toxicity. But when he started talking about a thought that all men are toxically masculine, and that's so incorrect. It's not true.
No.
It's not true. Like he says, there is a necessity of strength in the world, and ability to withstand and to create in the world, and to organize the world. And in order to do that, you have, like he says, you have to have internal strength to pull it off. And in males, this is seen as strength of character or will. And it's not a toxic masculinity. It's simply confidence that's not about himself. It's confidence that knowing that he can get the job done. Those who have strength just do. He sees that as one of the Divine Masculine traits, and I have to agree with him. I don't believe that all men are toxically masculine. Some men are strong and exhibit all different kinds of strengths. You know, and it is different from the feminine, but it's definitely not wrong. It's just different. So. And
the thing that gets me is that most of the men that talk more about their strengths and brag about their abilities and stuff, they have less than those who don't.
Yeah.
Who don't see their strengths. It's one thing to say, well, a strong man needs this and they do that, but you don't need to say, well, I was in war and I did this and I created this. And those who know don't speak. Those who speak don't know.
Yes, that's very true.
And I've been around a lot of men, you know who I'm talking about, that would sit there and brag all day about how the older you are, the better you used to be.
The older you are, the better you used to be?
Yes.
Yeah, some guys are like that. Yeah, ego comes from a small place,
and that is a toxic male.
That's a toxic male trait. Yeah, it's a twisting and a perversion of the divine masculine. So I think we're going to close for today's interview. I think we had some really good input on the divine masculine from the both of them. And so Jester D had suggested, or he brought up the concept of the left-handed path. And I'm thinking maybe we might want to do a show on left and right-handed paths, because there's a lot of misconceptions about left-handed. It's kind of like you have your left hand and your right hand. Neither one of them is more important than the other. You need both, So the left-handed path, I think we could find some surprising information on that for people. And maybe even do some interviews with people that are on the left-handed path, if I can find some.
Which is kind of funny because I'm ambidextrous, so I do use both hands quite often.
Okay. All right. Well, we want to thank you for taking the time to listen to It Makes You Think. I know this has been a long episode, but we are very, very glad to have been able to present it.
From the boys.
Yeah, and thank you to the guys for being part of the interviews. So until we meet again next couple of weeks from now, we hope to have you stop in and listen to us again with It Makes You Think, and we hope that what we've presented to you has sparked some thoughts for you, and that it does make you think. So say goodbye, Fur.
Bye, Fur.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for stopping in, and we'll talk to you later.
This episode of PPT Presents is brought to you by Pagan Pathways Temple. Pagan Pathways Temple is a 501c3 out of beautiful Madison Heights, Michigan. We offer classes, community outreach, ritual space, and a library available to our members. To find out more or to become a member, please go to paganpathwaystemple.org or patreon.com/paganpathwaystemple. Pagan Pathways Temple, growing in the old ways where all paths are open.
This PPT Presents broadcast is brought to you by TechWitch Detroit. TechWitch Detroit for all your IT needs. Please visit us on the web at techwitchdetroit.com. TechWitch Detroit, we can help.